Hey, welcome to another YouTube video by yours truly, Miri. And today I'm going to be talking about something that is all on the forefront of our minds, something that's really been keeping us up late at night, that we've been thinking about over and over and over again. If Abraham Lincoln died in 1865, why wasn't he buried until 1901? I've done no show prep whatsoever, so I'm going to basically tell you the story from my memory. Now, that means I can probably get a lot of facts wrong, like super wrong. In 1865, April, that is when Abraham Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. by none other than John Wilkes Booth. Mary Todd was just beside herself, devastated. So who wouldn't be, by the way? I mean, Mary Todd went insane, but for very good reasons. Interesting fact about burial grounds near Washington, D.C. What some of you might not know is if you go visit Arlington National Cemetery, where you can be buried if you're a veteran, you will also find Robert E. Lee's mansion there. Like, wasn't he the general of the Confederacy? Like, why is Robert E. Lee's home even standing? Good question. The reason why it's standing is because shortly after Lincoln won the war, he bought up a bunch of land in Arlington right in front of Robert E. Lee's house so that he could bury the Union dead in his front yard. So in any case, they wanted to bury him in Washington, D.C. Mary Todd was like, oh, hell no. Hell no, he's getting buried in Springfield. I don't want his ghost haunting me. He has to be buried where his family's buried, where we are from, blah, 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 blah. He lies and stayed in DC, and then he goes up to, I think, maybe like Philadelphia, New York, all these different places. He lies there so that people can pay their respects in 9 different places, at least. At each place where they had him lie in state, they had to embalm his body. Super well preserved, like Eva Peron. His casket is going through New York City, and I don't know the streets of New York City, so I don't know which street he was on. But in any case, there's this big building, and we know that the Roosevelts lived in that big building, and we know on what floor. And if you look in the picture, like on the floor where they're at, there's a window, and there's 2 children in the window. Fact, one of those children, Theodore Roosevelt. You have to actually put him in a temporary grave, which was a little underwhelming, let's put it that way. However, they finally get this mausoleum built, and then they put him in this really kind of ornate mausoleum thing. The accomplishments of Abraham Lincoln was creating the Secret Service, which we now know protects the President of the United States, but at the time was made to actually fight counterfeiting. So, and they're in this bar that's like super seedy. It's kind of where you go to, you know, meet women of the night or whatever. There's nowhere to sit. There's no decorations. There's nowhere to sit. People are just standing. It's known for criminals or criminal activity. And the only decoration in the bar is actually on this shelf up top where they keep all of the liquor. And it's a bust of Abraham Lincoln. So these guys are kind of scheming, like, how do we get our boss out of the clink? And they're trying to come up with ideas. And one of them is like, hey, look at that guy. Why don't we go steal his body, hold it for ransom, and demand some money, and that our boss gets released from prison. Now, what was significant about Election Day, it was like a very hotly contested election. Their scheming did not go unnoticed. And there was actually a Pinkerton officer that was hired by the government to follow him because he found out that they wanted to steal Abraham Lincoln's body. They did these graveyard tours so that cemetery keepers could show off like all the famous people that were buried in their cemetery. And on this particular Tuesday, not a lot of people were there because they were all like voting, and they, you know, knock on like the cemetery keeper's door and they're like, "Hey man, we want a tour." And then they start asking him these like kind of funny questions like, "So, are you here at night too? Like, do you live on the grounds?" He said, "Oh no, I don't live here. No, I go home." And they said, "Oh, that's wonderful. Like, you really need that family time." And then they said, "Well, do you post any guards to watch the dead people?" And he's like, "Oh, that's silly. I mean, dead people are not gonna move anywhere." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that was such a funny question. Why did we ask that?" Night falls, and they go to steal the sarcophagus, or they go to steal the body. And what they don't know, who has been hiding in the mausoleum the whole time? The Pinkerton officers. But there was a problem. They fell asleep, and because they were waiting like a long time and they're really bored and they're literally with dead people. And they take this massive they're like trying to take this massive lid off of the sarcophagus, which weighs a ton. The Pinkerton officer is startled from his sleep and his gun goes off. They run away and they get away. So the next morning, the groundskeeper shows up and he has some tours scheduled that day. And of, you know, people that want to see the grave of Abraham Lincoln. Oh my gosh, the lid of the sarcophagus is off of the thing, the sarcophagus. He can't possibly lift it by himself. There were some sticks and things, and he just covered Lincoln's body up with a bunch of sticks. Mary Todd passes away, but they're married. I need to make sure that they share eternity together. So what he does is he pretends to put Mary Todd in the sarcophagus next to Abraham Lincoln. But what he really does with her body is puts it in this kind of like makeshift casket kind of deal and puts her right next to Abraham Lincoln underneath the pile of sticks. A few more years go by and the mausoleum is falling apart a little bit. It needs some repairs, and the groundskeeper, same guy, he's getting real nervous because he knows that all of these people are gonna come in and do some work, and they're gonna be literally stomping on the bodies of Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd. What he does is he makes these like very shallow graves in that spot, in like the basement of this mausoleum thing, and buries them next to each other. There was like more construction that needed to be done, and there was just no hiding these bodies buried in shallow graves. And Abraham Lincoln's son was like so pissed. They need to just open up that casket and just make sure, like, is this for sure Abraham Lincoln? He was not only perfectly preserved, his face looked like it was made of bronze. So they went ahead and they buried him in the ground next to his wife under 10 feet of concrete. You're welcome. Well, I hope that you enjoyed your history lesson for today. I'm sure you learned a lot more about Abraham Lincoln than you were anticipating or cared to know, and maybe a lot more about grave robbing than you ever thought you could know. Well, that's what I'm here for. By the way, didn't this cake turn out super cute? If you want to learn how I make my signature cakes, go to my website, 10bloomcakes.com. There you will find tutorials and in-person workshops. Please follow me on Instagram at 10bloomcakes. That's at 10bloomcakes. And if you like this video, and if maybe in the future you want to learn more about odd moments in history or just whatever's on my mind while I decorate a cake, then please hit subscribe. It was wonderful chatting with you today. Have a good one.